The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never felt so empty. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire stared at the vacant seats where the human delegation once sat. The polished chrome chairs reflected the blue glow of the council chamber's lights, but they held no warmth, no life, no stubborn human voices arguing for what they called basic decency. 3 months had passed since the humans simply stopped coming to the sessions. No dramatic speeches, no angry declarations, no slamming of doors. One day they were there, the next day they weren't. The silence they left behind was deafening. The agenda for today's session includes trade route modifications through the Kepler sector, announced Council Speaker Thane, his mechanical voice echoing through the chamber. The Zarathi leader's multiple eyes scanned the assembly, carefully avoiding the human section. Everyone avoided looking there now. Zethkar shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The Kepler sector, that was human space, or had been human space. Nobody really knew what to call it anymore. The humans had withdrawn all their ships, all their stations, all their people. The massive trade hub that had connected 17 different species was now just empty space and automated warning beacons. Perhaps we should discuss opening those routes to other species, suggested Ambassador Quillix of the Hegemony. Her crystalline form sparkled as she spoke. The humans clearly have no interest in maintaining their obligations to galactic commerce. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. It was easier to pretend the humans were being unreasonable, easier than remembering why they had left. Zethkar remembered. He remembered the day when the human ambassador, Sarah Chen, had stood before this very council. Her species was facing a plague that was killing millions. The cure existed, developed by the advanced Altaran collective. But the Altarans wanted something in return. They wanted exclusive access to human agricultural technology, all of it, forever. The humans had refused. They said they couldn't trade away their ability to feed themselves. Ambassador Chen had stood there, her face pale but determined, asking for the council's help, asking for someone, anyone, to speak up for basic fairness. Zethkar had wanted to help. The Vorthan Empire had always respected human tenacity, but the Altarans were powerful. They controlled healing technology that every species needed. Speaking against them meant risking their own people's health. One by one, the council members had voted. The Hegemony abstained, claiming neutrality. The Zarathi Federation cited economic concerns. The Multari Confederacy worried about setting precedents. Even Zethkar's own empire had ultimately chosen silence. Only the humans voted against the proposal. One voice among dozens. It wasn't enough. Ambassador Chen had listened to the final tally with no expression on her face. She had gathered her papers, stood up, and walked to the center of the chamber. For a moment, Zethkar thought she might give one of those famous human speeches, the kind where they talked about hope and justice and never giving up. Instead, she had simply said, "We understand," then she left. The humans had honored their agreement. They provided the agricultural technology. Millions of human lives were saved by the cure, but something had broken that day. The humans became quiet in council sessions. They stopped proposing new initiatives. They stopped arguing for the rights of smaller species. Then came the incident with the Zorlan raiders. Pirates had been attacking shipping lanes for months. The council debated endlessly about jurisdiction and proper procedures while merchant vessels burned. The humans had offered to send their fleet to stop the attacks. They were the only ones with ships fast enough and crews brave enough to hunt pirates in deep space. But the Hegemony had objected. They said human intervention would be aggressive and destabilizing. The Zarathi agreed, worried about human ships operating freely in their space. The council voted to form a committee to study the problem instead. Ambassador Chen hadn't argued. She hadn't even looked surprised. She just made a note on her tablet and said, "We understand." 2 weeks later, the human fleet arrived in the raiding zone anyway. They swept through the area like an avenging angel, destroying every pirate ship they found. The raid stopped immediately. Shipping resumed. Thousands of lives were saved. The council was furious. They accused the humans of violating galactic law, of acting without authorization, of showing dangerous disregard for proper procedure. Ambassador Chen listened to every angry word without defending her people's actions. When they demanded an explanation, she had stood up slowly. "Our people were dying on those ships," she said quietly. "You chose to debate while they burned. We chose to act." The sanctions came quickly. Economic penalties, restricted access to council facilities, formal censure in the Galactic record. The humans accepted it all without complaint. They paid every fine. They followed every restriction. They obeyed every new rule designed to limit their influence. But they also started to withdraw. Human research stations went dark one by one. Trade agreements were quietly allowed to expire. Cultural exchange programs ended. The humans began turning inward, focusing only on their own space and their own people. The final breaking point came during the Antari genocide. The small, peaceful Antari species was being systematically exterminated by their neighbors, the militant Corvan Empire. The evidence was overwhelming. Entire colonies of Antari civilians were being wiped out. The council called for sanctions. They passed resolutions condemning the violence. They formed committees to investigate. But when the Antari representative begged for military intervention, for someone to actually stop the killing, the chamber fell silent. The Corvan were too powerful, their military was vast, their economy was connected to everyone else's, war with them would be costly and dangerous. One by one, the council members explained why they couldn't act. The math was simple, saving the Antari wasn't worth the risk. Ambassador Chen had requested to speak. She stood at the podium looking out at the assembled representatives. For a long moment, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "We came here believing we could make a difference," she said. "We thought that together we could build something better than what came before. We were wrong." She paused, looking down at her hands. "You've made it clear that we're too aggressive when we act and too naive when we hope. You want us to follow rules that you change whenever they become inconvenient. You want us to respect processes that exist only to avoid making hard choices." The chamber was completely silent. "We're withdrawing from council membership," Chen continued. "Not in anger, not in protest. We're leaving because we finally understand our place here. You don't want partners. You want someone to blame when things go wrong and someone to handle the dirty work when things go bad. We won't be that species anymore." She had walked out that day and never came back. None of them had. Now Zethkar sat in the empty chamber, listening to Ambassador Quillix discuss trade routes through abandoned human space. The irony wasn't lost on him. They were already moving to divide up what the humans had left behind. The species they had marginalized and constrained was suddenly very appealing when they were gone. "We should move carefully," he found himself saying. "The humans might return." Ambassador Quillix's crystalline form flickered with amusement. "I doubt that. They've made their choice. Good riddance, honestly, will be much more efficient without their constant moral posturing." But Zethkar wasn't thinking about efficiency. He was thinking about the Antari. Their genocide had continued unopposed. 3 billion people dead while the council debated proper procedures. He was thinking about the pirates, now returning to the shipping lanes because no one else was hunting them. He was thinking about a dozen other crises that the humans had quietly handled while the council argued. Most of all, he was thinking about the look in Ambassador Chen's eyes during her final speech. Not anger, not disappointment, just tired understanding. The humans hadn't left because they were giving up. They had left because they had finally accepted what everyone else had been telling them all along. They didn't belong here. The session continued around him, but Zethkar found it hard to focus. Something was coming. He could feel it in the way his people's intelligence reports had grown thin lately. The humans had always shared information freely. Their early warning networks had covered half the galaxy. Their diplomatic channels had prevented countless small conflicts from becoming wars. All of that was gone now. The council was flying blind, making decisions without the human perspective that had guided them for decades. And for the first time since joining the galactic community, Zethkar wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. The humans had always been different. They were too emotional, too quick to act, too willing to fight for principles instead of profit. But they were also the ones who stood up when everyone else sat down. They were the ones who said no when everyone else said yes. They were the conscience that the council had never asked for but desperately needed. Now they were gone, and in their silence, Zethkar was beginning to understand just how much trouble they were all in. The session ended with polite applause and satisfied murmurs. Plans were made. Committees were formed. The business of galactic governance continued as it always had. But as Zethkar walked past the empty human section, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were all just rearranging furniture on a ship that was already sinking. The humans had tried to warn them. They had tried to show them a better way, and when that failed, they had simply walked away. What scared Zethkar most was the growing certainty that they had been right to leave, and that whatever came next, the galaxy was going to face it without the only species that had ever been willing to do the right thing just because it was right. The silence the humans left behind wasn't empty. It was full of all the warnings they had tried to give, all the problems they had solved, all the disasters they had prevented. And now the Council was on its own. Captain Velter of the Hegemony Defense Fleet stared at the long-range sensor readings with growing unease. The data made no sense. According to his instruments, there was nothing in the outer rim sectors. Nothing at all. "Run the scan again," he ordered his sensor operator. "Full spectrum analysis." The young crystalline officer's form flickered nervously. "Sir, I've run it 12 times. The readings are consistent. All human colonies, stations, and outposts in sectors 7 through 15 show as completely abandoned." Velter's mandibles clicked in frustration. "That's impossible. There were over 40 million humans in that region last year. Populations that size don't just vanish." But the evidence was undeniable. Every human settlement beyond the core systems had been evacuated, not destroyed, not conquered, simply emptied and left behind like shells on a beach. The humans had pulled back to their oldest worlds, abandoning vast territories they had spent centuries developing. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Korath's flagship. She wants to speak with you immediately." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Korath, Supreme Commander of Hegemony Forces. Her crystalline form was flickering rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "Captain, what's your status on the border patrol?" she demanded without preamble. "Admiral, we're detecting massive human population movements. It appears they've abandoned all outlying colonies and consolidated around their core worlds. But that's not the strange part." "Explain." Velter brought up the tactical display. "They've activated something we've never seen before. Massive energy signatures around every remaining human system. Our sensors can't penetrate them. It's like each human world is surrounded by some kind of barrier." Admiral Korath's form went completely still. In crystalline body language, that was the equivalent of a human turning pale. "Are you certain of this?" "Yes, Admiral, and there's more. We've lost contact with all our intelligence assets in human space. Every spy, every monitoring station, every diplomatic channel. Complete communications blackout." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its commanding tone. "Captain, I need you to redirect to the Antari refugee camps immediately. Something's happening there." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Velter staring at a blank screen. He had served under Admiral Korath for 15 years. He had never heard fear in her voice before. The journey to the Antari camps took 6 hours. During that time, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human cargo ships were refusing to respond to hails. Human merchant vessels were turning away from ports they had used for decades. Human diplomatic staff were packing up and leaving without explanation. The humans weren't just withdrawing from the Council. They were withdrawing from galactic civilization entirely. When Velter's ship arrived at the Antari refugee camps, he understood why Admiral Korath had sounded frightened. The camps were empty, all of them. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting residual engine signatures from approximately 2,000 human vessels. Heavy transports by the look of it." 2,000? Velter felt his confidence crumbling. "How many Antari refugees were in these camps?" "Approximately 15 million, sir. The survivors of the Corvin genocide." The numbers didn't make sense at first. Then Velter realized what had happened. The humans had come. They had loaded every surviving Antari onto their ships and taken them away. All of them. The entire species that the Council had failed to save. "Did we have any monitoring stations tracking the human ships?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir. 3 automated tracking satellites. All went dark simultaneously about 18 hours ago." Velter closed his eyes. The humans had been planning this for months, maybe longer. While the Council had been congratulating themselves on their efficiency without human moral posturing, the humans had been systematically preparing for complete isolation. His communications console chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender was listed as unknown, but the encryption signature was definitely human. "Play it," Velter ordered. The message was audio only, and the voice was calm and professional. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Coalition. We are transmitting this message to all galactic powers to avoid any misunderstandings about our recent actions." Velter's blood chilled. Sarah Chen hadn't been an admiral when she was the human ambassador. The fact that she now held military rank suggested things had changed dramatically within human space. Effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from all galactic institutions, treaties, and agreements. We are recalling all human personnel from non-human space and asking all non-human personnel to leave human territory within 72 hours. The message continued with clinical precision. All trade agreements are terminated, all defense pacts are void, all scientific exchange programs are ended. Humanity is returning to a policy of complete isolation from galactic affairs. There was a pause, and when Chen spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Velter's scales prickle. "For those who might consider this an opportunity for expansion, please understand that human space is now under the protection of defensive measures you have not seen before. Any attempt to enter our territory without explicit permission will be met with appropriate response." The message ended with coordinates. Velter checked them against his star charts and felt his heart skip a beat. It was the location of the former Corvin capital world. "Set course for those coordinates," he ordered. "Best possible speed." The journey took 8 hours. During that time, Velter received increasingly frantic communications from across the galaxy. The Multari Confederacy had lost contact with 3 exploration fleets that had been mapping systems near human space. The Zarathi Federation reported that their border monitoring stations had detected massive energy discharges from the direction of human territory. Most disturbing of all, the Corvin Empire had gone completely silent. Not just their government communications. Everything. Every ship, every station, every colony world. The entire empire that had committed genocide against the Antari had simply stopped responding to all external contact. When Velter's ship arrived at the coordinates Chen had provided, he understood why. The Corvin capital world was gone. Not destroyed, not shattered, gone. Where a planet with 8 billion inhabitants had orbited its star just days before, there was now only empty space and a fatting cloud of exotic particles. "Sir," his science officer whispered, "I'm detecting artificial gravity distortions throughout the entire system. It's like someone reached in and just removed everything, not just the planet. Every asteroid, every space station, every ship. The entire system has been stripped clean." Velter stared at the empty space where an entire civilization had existed. Any sign of how it was done? "No, sir. No weapon signatures, no debris. No energy residue we can identify. It's like the Corvin Empire was simply edited out of existence." A new transmission appeared on their communications board. Same unknown sender, same human encryption. "This is Admiral Chen again. By now you've probably discovered what happened to the Corvin Empire. They are not dead. They have been relocated to a place where they can no longer threaten innocent species. Consider this a demonstration of humanity's commitment to isolation. We will not be bothered again." The transmission included a broader message. A list of every species that had voted against human proposals in the Council. A detailed analysis of every time the galaxy had chosen profit over principle, efficiency over justice, stability over what was right. "You asked us to respect your processes," Chen's voice continued. "You demanded we follow your rules. You insisted we accept your version of civilization. We did. For decades, we tried to work within your systems. We compromised. We negotiated. We accepted defeat gracefully when you voted against basic decency." Velter could hear something building in her voice. Not anger, something much more dangerous. "You were very clear about what you wanted from us. Compliance. Silence. You wanted us to provide solutions to problems you were too afraid to solve, while accepting blame for any consequences you found uncomfortable. You wanted us to be your hammer when you needed things broken, and your scapegoat when you needed someone to blame." The message shifted, and suddenly Chen's voice was coming through the ship's speakers with perfect clarity. Every ship in the system was receiving this transmission. "We have learned your lessons well. We understand now that there is no point in appealing to your better nature. You have made it clear that you don't have one. You have shown us that you will always choose the easy path over the right path, that you value your comfort more than other people's lives. Velter realized he was holding his breath. So we are giving you exactly what you wanted. We are leaving. We will not interfere in your affairs again. We will not offer aid when you face disasters. We will not provide solutions when you face problems. We will not stand between you and the consequences of your choices. There was a long pause. When Chen spoke again, her voice was softer but somehow more frightening. The galaxy is yours now. Govern it according to your principles. Build the civilization you wanted without our interference. We will be watching from a distance to see what you create when you no longer have us to blame for the hard choices. The transmission ended with a final message that appeared as text on every screen in the fleet. The humans have departed in silence. What remains is yours to face alone. Velter looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all staring at the empty space where the Corvan Empire had been. 8 billion people, simply erased from existence and relocated somewhere else. The technological power required for such an action was beyond anything the galaxy had imagined possible. And the humans had done it to protect the Antari, the same species the Council had decided wasn't worth saving. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving priority messages from the Galactic Council. They're calling an emergency session." Velter nodded slowly. "Set course for the council chambers and send a message to Admiral Korath. Tell her we need to talk about what we're going to do next." As his ship turned away from the empty system, Velter couldn't stop thinking about Chen's final words. The humans had departed in silence, and what remained was theirs to face alone. For the first time in his life, Captain Velter of the Hegemony Defense Fleet wondered if his civilization was strong enough to survive without the species they had just driven away. The humans were gone, and they had taken their protection with them. What was coming next was going to test every assumption the galaxy had made about strength, power, and survival. And they were going to face it without the one species that had ever been willing to stand between civilization and the dark. The emergency council session lasted 18 hours. Ambassador Zethkar sat through every minute of it, watching his fellow council members argue, panic, and slowly come to terms with their new reality. The humans were gone, and they had taken more than just their ships and people with them. They had taken the galaxy's safety net. "Order, I will have order in this chamber," Council Speaker Thane's mechanical voice cut through the chaos. The Zarathi leader's multiple eyes were darting frantically between the arguing delegates. This was not how galactic governance was supposed to work. Ambassador Quillix of the Hegemony was on her feet, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. "We need immediate military action. The humans have committed an act of war by destroying the Corvan Empire." "They didn't destroy them," corrected Ambassador Nethel of the Multari Confederacy. "According to all reports, they relocated them, the entire species, every ship, every station, every world. Do you have any idea what kind of technological advancement that represents?" "Does it matter?" Quillix shot back. "They acted without authorization. They violated every principle of galactic law. We cannot allow this precedent to stand." Ambassador Zethkar found himself speaking before he realized it. "What exactly are you proposing we do about it?" The chamber fell silent. Quillix turned to face him, her form brightening with anger. "We enforce galactic law. We make them answer for their crimes." "With what army?" Zethkar asked quietly. "The humans just made an entire star system disappear. They relocated 8 billion people across interstellar distances without anyone detecting how they did it. What makes you think our combined fleets could even find them, let alone force them to do anything?" The uncomfortable truth settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. For all their talk of galactic unity and collective strength, every species in the Council had depended on human military capability. The humans had the fastest ships, the most advanced technology, and the only military force that had consistently been willing to deploy against serious threats. "The real question," continued Zethkar, "is what we're going to do about the problems the humans used to solve for us." Council Speaker Thane activated the central display. "Intelligence reports from the past 72 hours. The Void Walkers have been detected moving toward the outer rim. The Devourer swarms are showing increased activity in 3 sectors. The Phantom Fleet has been spotted near the trade routes." A collective shiver ran through the assembly. These were the threats that had given civilizations nightmares for millennia. Ancient enemies that appeared from deep space, destroyed everything in their path, then vanished back into the darkness. For the past 50 years, they had been held at bay by a simple fact. Attacking galactic civilization meant facing human retaliation. The humans maintained early warning networks throughout the galaxy, Thane continued. They operated the deep space monitoring stations that gave us advance notice of these threats. They deployed the rapid response fleets that intercepted attacks before they reached populated systems. Ambassador Vex of the Trading Union, a species that rarely spoke in council, raised a trembling appendage. The economic implications are catastrophic. Human cargo vessels handled 47% of all interstellar trade. Their shipping insurance guaranteed safe passage through dangerous regions. Without their protection, the cost of interstellar commerce will increase by at least 800%. That's assuming anyone is willing to risk shipping at all, added Ambassador Quillix, her anger replaced by growing concern. Who's going to run cargo through pirate-infested space without human escort fleets? The reports kept coming. Human medical research had provided cures for 17 different plagues that periodically swept through galactic civilization. Human agricultural technology fed billions of people on worlds that couldn't produce enough food naturally. Human engineering firms had built the infrastructure that held the galaxy together. And human diplomacy had prevented countless wars. Ambassador Zethkar pulled up his own intelligence files. In the past 50 years, humans have mediated 237 territorial disputes. They've provided neutral ground for peace negotiations in over 400 conflicts. They've served as peacekeepers in regions where no other species was trusted by both sides. We can handle our own diplomacy, declared Ambassador Malkar of the Tharkian Dominion. We don't need human interference. Really? Zethkar asked. Then explain why your border conflict with the Kelnari Republic has escalated to actual shooting in the 6 weeks since the humans stopped providing mediation services. Malkar's scaled hide flushed with embarrassment. The fighting between his people and the Kelnari had indeed resumed the moment human peacekeepers withdrew from the disputed region. Council Speaker Thane raised his mechanical arms for attention. The immediate concern is the breakdown of the Void Walker containment protocols. For the past 30 years, human deep space monitors have tracked Void Walker movements and coordinated response efforts. Without that intelligence network, we're flying blind. Ambassador Quillix's form was now flickering rapidly. How long before they realize the humans are gone? Intelligence suggests they already know, Thane replied grimly. Void Walker activity has increased 700% in the past week. They're testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses. The chamber erupted in panicked chatter. The Void Walkers were not like ordinary enemies. They were something from the dark between the stars, ancient and hostile and utterly alien. Most species could barely comprehend their technology. Only the humans had consistently been able to match them in battle. We need to establish our own monitoring network, suggested Ambassador Nethel. Pool our resources, create a unified defense force. With whose technology? Asked Zethkar. Human sensors were 3 generations ahead of anything we have. Their ship designs could outrun Void Walker vessels. Their weapons could penetrate Void Walker defenses. We're talking about replacing a military force that was specifically designed to fight enemies we can barely understand. Then what do you suggest? Quillix demanded. That we just give up, let the galaxy burn because the humans decided to abandon us. Zethkar looked around the chamber at the faces of his fellow ambassadors. Fear was written clearly on every alien feature. For decades, they had treated the humans as a necessary nuisance. Too aggressive, too emotional, too willing to upset the status quo. Now they were beginning to understand that the humans hadn't been disrupting the order of things. They had been protecting it. I suggest we consider why they left, Zethkar said quietly, and whether there's any chance of convincing them to come back. The chamber fell silent again. On the central display, intelligence reports continued to scroll past. Void Walker movements, pirate activity, trade route disruptions, border conflicts escalating to violence, plague outbreaks with no human medical support, engineering failures with no human technical expertise to fix them. In just 3 days, the carefully maintained order of galactic civilization was beginning to unravel. The humans will not respond to our communications, reported Ambassador Thane. All diplomatic channels have been severed. Their territory is protected by defensive systems we cannot penetrate or even understand. They have made it clear that they consider themselves no longer part of galactic civilization. But surely they wouldn't let the galaxy burn out of spite, said Ambassador Vex hopefully. They're too human for that, too concerned with helping others. Zethkar thought about Ambassador Sarah Chen's final speech, the tired understanding in her eyes, the way she had stopped arguing with the Council's decisions and simply said, "We understand," over and over again. They tried to help, he said. For decades they tried to show us a better way. We responded by constraining them, sanctioning them, and blaming them for every hard choice we were too cowardly to make ourselves. We told them they were too aggressive when they acted and too naive when they hoped. We made it clear that we wanted them to solve our problems while accepting responsibility for the consequences. He paused, looking at the intelligence reports. They learned the lesson we taught them. They stopped trying to save us from ourselves. Then what happens now? Asked Ambassador Mulcar quietly. Before anyone could answer, the chamber's emergency alarms began blaring. Council Speaker Thane's multiple eyes focused on the tactical display as urgent data streamed in from across the galaxy. Void Walker emergence detected in 6 sectors simultaneously, he announced. Fleet strength estimated at 3,000 vessels. They're moving toward populated systems. The chamber erupted in chaos. 3,000 Void Walker ships was the largest force ever recorded. In the past, 100 Void Walker vessels had been enough to threaten entire star systems. This was an invasion force. Deploy all available fleets, ordered Ambassador Quillix. Coordinate defensive positions. With what? Thane asked grimly. The combined military forces of all Council species total approximately 800 vessels capable of deep space combat. The humans alone operated over 2,000 ships designed specifically for Void Walker engagement. The math was simple and terrifying. Without the humans, the galaxy's military capabilities had been reduced by more than half, and what remained was designed for fighting other conventional forces, not the alien horrors from the void. Emergency transmission coming in, reported the communications officer. Source unknown, it's using human encryption protocols. Put it through, ordered Thane. Admiral Sarah Chen's voice filled the chamber. She sounded tired but resolute. Galactic Council leadership, this is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Coalition. We are detecting Void Walker movement toward your territories. The chamber held its collective breath. As we announced previously, humanity has withdrawn from galactic affairs. We will not be providing military assistance. However, we thought you should know that the Void Walkers are moving because they have detected the absence of human defensive patrols. There was a pause that felt like an eternity. You have approximately 6 hours before they reach the outer colonies. We suggest you use that time to consider what kind of civilization you want to build without our interference. The galaxy is yours now. Defend it according to your principles. The transmission ended. Ambassador Zethkar stared at the tactical display showing the advancing Void Walker fleet. 6 hours. The greatest military threat in known history was 6 hours away from populated systems, and they had no idea how to stop it. The humans had tried to warn them. They had tried to protect them. And when the Council chose politics over survival, the humans had simply walked away. Now the consequences were coming, and they were coming fast. The galaxy was about to discover what life was like without the species that had stood between civilization and the dark for 50 years. What they were about to learn was that some protections, once lost, could not be replaced. The humans had departed in silence. What remained was for the galaxy to face alone. And time was running out. The first colony to fall was Kira's 7, a mining world in the Outer Rim with 2 million inhabitants. The Void Walker fleet swept through the system like a black tide, their impossible ships moving in patterns that hurt to watch. By the time the distress signals reached the Council chambers, there was nothing left but empty space and the lingering psychic screams of an entire world's population. Ambassador Zethkar watched the tactical display in numb horror as the red markers representing Void Walker fleets continued their advance. 3 more systems had gone dark in the past hour. The combined military response from 5 different species had managed to destroy exactly 12 Void Walker vessels while losing over 300 ships of their own. "Fall back to the secondary defense line," ordered Admiral Korath through the emergency command channel. "All vessels retreat to grid coordinates 77 Alpha." The retreat order felt like a nail in the coffin of galactic civilization. For 50 years, the standard response to Void Walker incursions had been immediate counterattack. Human fleets would surge forward to meet them in deep space, engaging them far from populated systems. The idea of falling back, of letting them reach inhabited worlds, was unthinkable. But without human ships, it was also unavoidable. "Status report from the Hegemony Third Fleet," came another voice over the command channel. "We've lost 60% of our ships. Void Walker defensive technology is unlike anything we've encountered. Our weapons are barely scratching their hulls." Ambassador Quillix turned to face Zethkar, her crystalline form now flickering so rapidly it was painful to look at. "We have to contact the humans, make them understand what's happening." "They already know," Zethkar replied quietly. "They told us this would happen. They warned us that the Void Walkers would move once they realized human patrols were gone. But surely they won't let entire worlds burn just to make a point." Zethkar pulled up the communication logs from the past 6 hours. Over 200 attempts to reach human territory. Every message bounced back from the mysterious barriers surrounding their space, not blocked or rejected, simply returned as if human space no longer existed in the same dimension as the rest of the galaxy. "They're not making a point," he said. "They're keeping their word. They told us the galaxy was ours to defend according to our principles. This is what our principles look like when tested by real danger." The emergency session had been going on for 8 hours now, and the debates had grown increasingly desperate. Some delegates argued for attempting to breach the barriers around human space. Others suggested trying to negotiate with the Void Walkers. A few had even proposed abandoning the Outer Rim entirely and consolidating defenses around the core worlds. All of these plans shared one common feature. They were born of panic rather than strategy. "Incoming priority transmission from the Multari Home Fleet," announced Council Speaker Thane. "Patching through now." The voice that came through the speakers belonged to Fleet Admiral Kesty, one of the most respected military leaders in the galaxy. She sounded exhausted and defeated. "Council Chambers, this is Admiral Kesty. We've engaged the primary Void Walker formation at the Centaurus Junction. Initial fleet strength was 400 vessels. Current operational status." There was a long pause. 17 ships remaining. We're falling back to the inner defense perimeter." The numbers hit the chamber like a physical blow. The Multari had deployed their entire home fleet, the pride of their military. 400 of their best ships, armed with the most advanced weapons available to non-human species. The Void Walkers had destroyed over 95% of them. "Admiral," called out Ambassador Nethel, "what can you tell us about their capabilities? How are they so effective against our forces?" "It's not just their weapons," came the reply. "Their entire approach to warfare is different. They don't fight like any species we know. They move in coordinated patterns that seem to predict our tactics before we employ them. It's like they're reading our minds." Zethkar felt a chill run down his spine. He pulled up archived combat reports from previous Void Walker encounters. Every successful engagement had been led by human forces using tactics that seemed random and chaotic compared to standard galactic military doctrine. "Admiral," he called out, "in your engagements, did you employ standard fleet formations and attack patterns?" "Of course, regulation tactics, proven effective against all known enemy types." "The humans never used regulation tactics against Void Walkers," Zethkar said quietly. "Their combat doctrine was completely different, unpredictable, almost chaotic." The implications began to sink in around the chamber. The humans hadn't just been protecting the galaxy with superior technology. They had developed an entirely different approach to fighting an enemy that could predict and counter conventional warfare. And that knowledge had left with them. "Sir," came Admiral Kesty's voice again, now strained with urgency. "We're detecting additional Void Walker formations entering our sector, at least 1,000 ships. They're not just attacking randomly, they're coordinating across multiple star systems simultaneously." The tactical display updated with new intelligence. The scattered Void Walker attacks were beginning to reveal a pattern. They weren't just destroying colonies. They were systematically dismantling the infrastructure that held galactic civilization together. Trade routes, communication networks, defense installations. Everything the humans had helped build and protect was being methodically torn apart. "It's a planned campaign," whispered Ambassador Vex. "They're not just raiding, they're conquering." The realization brought a new level of terror to the chamber. Previous Void Walker incursions had been limited in scope. Hit-and-run attacks that destroyed individual targets before disappearing back into deep space. This was different. This was an organized assault on galactic civilization itself. "We need to evacuate the Outer Rim," declared Ambassador Quillix. "Pull back our populations to defensible positions around the core worlds." "Evacuate 30 billion people?" asked Ambassador Thane. "With what ships?" "Human cargo vessels handled the majority of interstellar transport. Without them, we have maybe 10% of the lift capacity needed for an operation that size." The scale of their dependence on human infrastructure was becoming clear. For decades, the humans had provided the foundation that allowed galactic civilization to function. Ships, technology, expertise, security. They had been the invisible backbone that held everything together. And the Council had treated them like an inconvenience. "There has to be something we can do," insisted Ambassador Malkar. "Some way to reach the humans, make them understand that we need their help." "They understand perfectly," said a new voice from the chamber entrance. "That's why they left." Every head turned to see a figure walking down the center aisle. It was Ambassador Sarah Chen, but she looked different. Gone was the diplomatic formal wear of the council chambers. She was dressed in the dark blue uniform of human military command, with admiral's insignia gleaming on her shoulders. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. How had she gotten past the security barriers? How had she even reached the council station? Chen walked to the center of the chamber with calm confidence, seemingly unbothered by the stares of hundreds of alien delegates. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the vast hall without amplification. "You want to know why we won't help?" she asked. "Because you've made it clear that our help isn't wanted. You've spent decades telling us we're too aggressive, too emotional, too willing to upset your precious status quo. You've constrained our actions, sanctioned our choices, and blamed us for every difficult decision you were too cowardly to make yourselves." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who had voted against human proposals time after time. "When we tried to stop the Antari genocide, you told us we were violating sovereignty. When we hunted pirates, you accused us of dangerous militarism. When we offered to share our medical technology freely, you insisted on licensing agreements that would have left us unable to treat our own people." Ambassador Quillix rose to her feet. "Admiral Chen, we're facing extinction. Whatever our past disagreements, surely you can see that this is different." Chen's expression didn't change. "Is it? When the Antari faced extinction, where was this urgency? When smaller species were being wiped out by disease or starvation, where was this call for unity? You found ways to avoid helping them. You found reasons why it wasn't your problem." She gestured to the tactical display showing the advancing Void Walker fleets. "This is your problem now. Handle it according to your principles." Ambassador Zethkar found himself standing. "Admiral, people are dying. Billions of innocent civilians who had nothing to do with the Council's decisions." For the first time, Chen's composure cracked slightly. "Do you think we don't know that? Do you think we're not watching our former neighbors burn? Every human in our space can see what's happening. Every one of them is asking why we're not deploying our fleets to save people we spent decades protecting." She paused, and when she continued, there was pain in her voice. "And every time one of them asks, I have to remind them of what we learned. We learned that when we act to protect others, we're criticized for being aggressive. When we don't act, we're blamed for being negligent. We learned that no matter what we do, it will be wrong in someone's eyes." "So you're just going to let the galaxy die out of spite?" demanded Ambassador Quillix. "No," Chen replied quietly. "We're going to let the galaxy learn to defend itself. We're giving you exactly what you said you wanted: freedom from human interference, the right to make your own choices without our moral posturing getting in the way." She turned to leave, then stopped. "There is one thing I can offer: information." The chamber fell silent. "The Void Walkers aren't just attacking randomly. They're testing you. They want to see if you've learned to fight without human assistance. They're probing for the weaknesses that our protection used to cover. She looked directly at Zethkar. You want to survive this? Stop fighting like you're trying to impress each other and start fighting like your lives depend on it. Stop following regulations and start adapting. The humans survived Void Walker attacks because we were willing to change, to learn, to sacrifice. Chen began walking toward the exit. The choice is yours. You can keep debating proper procedures while your worlds burn, or you can finally become the civilization you always claimed to be. As she reached the chamber doors, she turned back one final time. The humans have departed in silence. What you do with what remains is up to you. The doors closed behind her, leaving the council chambers in stunned quiet. Outside, the Void Walker fleets continued their advance, and time continued to run out. For the first time in decades, the galaxy was truly on its own. The question was whether they would learn to stand together before it was too late to matter. 6 months after Admiral Chen's final visit to the council chambers, Ambassador Zethkar stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Galactic Defense Station, watching supply ships deliver humanitarian aid to the Kira system. Where once there had been empty space and the psychic echoes of genocide, new colonies were taking root under heavy protection. The galaxy had survived, barely. The cost had been staggering: 47 worlds lost to Void Walker attacks, 3 species driven to near extinction, the complete collapse of the interstellar economy. But in the crucible of that crisis, something unexpected had emerged. The surviving species had finally learned to work together. "Sir," called his aide, a young Vorthan officer named Kethel, "the defense coordination meeting is ready to begin." Zethkar nodded and made his way to the command center. The room was full of representatives from dozens of species, all working together on the massive project of rebuilding galactic civilization. It was chaotic, inefficient, and often frustrating. It was also the most effective cooperation the galaxy had ever achieved. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. In the first weeks after the Void Walker invasion began, the traditional council approach had failed catastrophically. Emergency sessions became shouting matches. Species hoarded resources. Military coordination broke down into jurisdictional disputes. It was only when the third wave of attacks began that everything changed. Admiral Korath of the Hegemony made a decision that went against every protocol in the military handbook. Instead of maintaining proper fleet formations, she split her forces into small, unpredictable groups that hit the Void Walkers from random directions. It worked. The chaotic, seemingly unplanned attacks confused the Void Walker targeting systems. For the first time since the humans left, a non-human fleet achieved a victory against them. Word spread quickly through the surviving military forces. Within days, every admiral was abandoning regulation tactics in favor of human-style chaotic warfare. But the real breakthrough came when the Multari shared their medical technology freely with the Hegemony refugee camps. No licensing agreements. No trade negotiations. Just one species helping another because it was the right thing to do. Other species followed suit, sharing resources and expertise without thought of profit or political advantage. The humans had been right. When faced with extinction, the galaxy's moral compass finally pointed toward cooperation instead of competition. "Status report on the Deep Space Monitoring Network," requested Admiral Velter, who now commanded the Joint Defense Forces. The former Hegemony captain had been promoted after his fleet's innovative tactics during the Battle of Centaurus. "Network coverage is at 60%, reported the Zarathi technician. "We're still behind human capabilities, but the early warning system is functional. We're detecting Void Walker movements 48 hours in advance instead of the 6 hours we managed during the crisis." Zethkar smiled. The monitoring network was a perfect example of what the galaxy could accomplish when species worked together. Zarathi sensors, Multari processing power, Vorthan engineering, and Hegemony coordination. No single species could have built it alone, but together they had created something approaching human effectiveness. "Any signs of further Void Walker activity?" asked Admiral Velter. "Minimal probing actions only," came the reply. "Intelligence suggests they've withdrawn to observe our response patterns. It's possible they're waiting to see if our new defensive arrangements are permanent." The Void Walkers had stopped their main assault 3 months ago, as suddenly as they had begun it. Intelligence analysis suggested they had achieved their primary goal. They had tested whether the galaxy could defend itself without human protection. The answer, barely and at tremendous cost, was yes. "Sir," called another technician, "we're receiving a transmission on the emergency diplomatic channel. Source is human space." The command center fell silent. In the 6 months since the humans had departed, there had been no direct communication from their territory. The barriers around human space remained impenetrable to outside contact. "Put it through," ordered Admiral Velter. Admiral Chen's voice filled the room, but she sounded different, less tired, less burdened. "Galactic Defense Coordination Center, this is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Coalition. We've been monitoring your reconstruction efforts." Zethkar felt his heart's race. After everything that had happened, were the humans finally ready to return? "We want you to know that we've been impressed by your progress," Chen continued. "The cooperative defense network you've established shows real promise. The resource-sharing initiatives are exactly what we hoped you might achieve when forced to stand on your own." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, there was something that might have been pride in her voice. "You've learned to work together without needing someone to force you. You've chosen cooperation over competition when your survival depended on it. Most importantly, you've started making hard choices based on what's right rather than what's profitable." Admiral Velter activated the response channel. "Admiral Chen, on behalf of the galactic community, I want to thank you for the information you provided during our darkest hour. Your advice about adapting our tactics saved countless lives." "You saved those lives yourselves," Chen replied. "We just reminded you that you had the capability all along. The question is what you do next." "We're hoping," said Zethkar, "that you might consider returning to the galactic community, not as our protectors but as our partners, as equals working together for something better than what came before." The silence stretched for so long that Zethkar wondered if the transmission had been cut. When Chen finally responded, her words carried a weight that filled the room. "The humans have been watching and waiting to see if you would learn from the crisis or return to your old patterns once the immediate danger passed. Waiting to see if the cooperation we witnessed was born of desperation or genuine growth." Another pause. "The answer appears to be both. You've maintained the resource-sharing agreements even after the emergency ended. You've kept the joint defense forces operational despite the cost. Most importantly, you've started intervening to protect smaller species that can't protect themselves." Zethkar thought about the recent deployment of joint forces to stop a slave-trading operation in the Outer Rim. 3 months ago, such an action would have been debated to death in committee. Now it had been approved within hours and executed within days. "However," Chen continued, "we've also noted disturbing signs. Some species are already pushing to return to the old council system. There are calls to re-establish the bureaucratic procedures that prevented effective action for decades. The Altaran Collective has started demanding exclusive access to refugee medical treatment in exchange for their healing technology." The uncomfortable truth was that, while the majority of species had embraced the new cooperative model, some were already trying to exploit it for their own advantage. The humans had seen it before anyone else, of course. "Here's what we're prepared to offer," Chen said. "Limited re-engagement, not a return to the old system, but something new. The humans will participate in the galactic community as one voice among many. We'll share our technology and expertise freely, but we won't be your soldiers or your moral conscience anymore." She paused. "The galaxy will sink or swim based on its own choices. We'll be there to help if asked, but we won't be there to save you from yourselves." Admiral Velter exchanged glances with Zethkar. It wasn't what they had hoped for, but it was more than they had dared to expect. "What would you need from us?" Velter asked. "Proof that the changes are real," Chen replied immediately. "We want to see the new cooperative model institutionalized. We want binding agreements that prevent any species from hoarding critical resources during emergencies. We want joint forces that can act quickly without requiring unanimous consent for every action. And we want the right to leave again if you revert to your old patterns," she added. "The humans won't be trapped in a system that values process over people ever again." Zethkar smiled. It was a hard bargain, but a fair one, and it was exactly what the galaxy needed to hear. "We accept," he said. "When can we begin negotiations?" "The first human delegation will arrive at the new coordination center in 72 hours, Chen replied. But understand this, we're not coming back to save you. We're coming back to see if we can build something together that's worth saving." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in excited discussion. The humans were returning, but on very different terms. No longer the galaxy's protectors and moral conscience, but partners in building something better. 6 months ago, Zethkar would have seen this as a loss. The galaxy was losing its safety net, its reliable source of solutions to impossible problems. Now he saw it differently. They were gaining something much more valuable, the chance to prove that they had learned from their mistakes. The humans had departed in silence, taking their protection with them. But in doing so, they had forced the galaxy to find its own strength. They had learned to cooperate instead of compete, to share instead of hoard, to act on principle instead of profit. It wasn't perfect. It might never be perfect. But it was real progress toward the kind of civilization the humans had always tried to encourage them to become. As Zethkar watched the supply ships continue their work in the Kira system, he realized that Admiral Chen had been right about something else. The galaxy hadn't needed saving. It had needed to learn to save itself. And finally, painfully, costly as it had been, they had. The humans were coming home, not as saviors, but as equals. Not to a galaxy that depended on them for protection, but to a galaxy that had learned to stand on its own. It was, Zethkar thought, exactly what both sides had needed all along. The silence was ending, but what came next would be built by everyone working together. The way it should have been from the beginning.